Hi everyone. Welcome to ISC Psychology for Part 2 on intelligence, where we will be discussing the remaining three theories of intelligence by Guilford, Sternberg, and Gardner in a clear, exam-oriented way. At the end of this video, I will also go over some application-based exam questions and share exam tips which will help you score better. Let us get started. We will first cover Guilford's theory. J.P. Guilford was an American psychologist whose background was in psychometrics, the science of using psychological measurement. He took a deeply systematic approach to the question of intelligence. Guilford's structure of intellect proposes that intelligence is not one thing, not seven things, but 180 different intellectual factors. These 180 factors emerge from combining three dimensions, each with multiple categories within it. The three dimensions are operations, contents, and products. Let us look at each one by one. Operations refers to the kind of mental process being performed, what the mind is actually doing to the information it receives. Guilford identified 6 operations: cognition, knowing, understanding, discovering, or becoming aware of information. This is basic comprehension, taking in information and making sense of it. Memory recording, taking in information and storing it immediately for retention. Memory retention, retaining stored information over a period of time and being able to access it later. Divergent production, generating multiple different responses from a single piece of information. This is basically creative thinking, the ability to produce many varied ideas, associations, or solutions. Convergent production, generating the single best or most conventional response to a problem. This is the kind of thinking that is tested in most traditional intelligence tests and finding you the correct answer. Evaluation, making judgments about the accuracy, quality, consistency, or appropriateness of information. Contents refers to the type of material or information being processed. Guilford identified 5 content types: figural, visual or spatial information, shapes, patterns, diagrams, or images; symbolic, letters, numbers, or other symbols that represent something else; semantic, verbal meanings, means words, language, and concepts; behavioral, information about people and their behavior, so basically social information, understanding others' intentions and feelings; and lastly, auditory, sound-based information, which is a content type Guilford added later. Products refers to the form in which information is processed and expressed, basically, what kind of mental output is being produced. Guilford identified 6 products. Units, single items or pieces of information, which means individual facts or data points. Classes, groupings of items based on shared characteristics. Relations, connections or relationships between items. Systems, organized patterns or structures involving multiple elements. Transformations, changes, modifications, or revisions to information. Implications, inferences, predictions, or conclusions drawn from the information. Each of the 180 factors represents a unique combination of one operation, one content type, and one product. The model maps the entire space of possible intellectual abilities like a 3-dimensional grid. Each cell in the grid is a distinct intellectual factor. The practical application of this model is very significant. Traditional intelligence tests, Guilford argued, are measures of only a slice of this space, primarily cognition and convergent production with semantic and symbolic content. Everything else, including divergent production, behavioral intelligence, figural content, and transformations, gets ignored. A person could be highly intelligent in these unmeasured areas, and their ability would be completely invisible to a standard IQ test. One of Guilford's most lasting contributions came from his distinction between divergent and convergent production. Convergent production is what traditional tests measure: one correct answer. Divergent production is creativity, which means many possible answers, original ideas, and flexibility of thought. Let us now look at the limitations of this model. The main criticism of Guilford's model is that 180 separate factors is extremely difficult to test and validate empirically. When researchers have actually tried to test these factors, they found significant overlap between many of these. They do not emerge as cleanly in practice as the model predicts. Additionally, the model predicts complete independence between factors, so no general factor and no correlations between the cells. But the evidence actually shows consistently that intellectual abilities are positively correlated. People who score highly on one intellectual ability tend to score higher on others as well, which is exactly what Guilford's model does not predict. Moving on to Sternberg's theory. Robert Sternberg is one of the most influential figures in intelligence research over the last 50 years. His approach to intelligence is distinctive because it starts with a different question than most of his predecessors. Where Spearman, Thurston, Guilford, and Cattell all asked, "What are the components of intelligence?" Sternberg asked, "What does it actually mean to be intelligent in the real world? What do intelligent people do that less intelligent people do not?" His answer was the Triarchic theory, named for its three subfeatures, each addressing a different aspect of intelligence. The word triarchic means ruled by three, and the three components are analytical intelligence, creative intelligence, and practical intelligence. Before we go into each component, I want to give you the ISC terminology precisely, because Sternberg's three components have specific names in the syllabus that you need to use in exam answers. The three are analytical or componential components, with three subtheories called meta components, performance components, and knowledge acquisition components. Creative or experiential intelligence, with subtheories of novelty and automation. And lastly, contextual or practical intelligence, with subtheories of adaptation, selection, and shaping. Analytical intelligence refers to the information processing components that people use when they think analytically. This is the closest of Sternberg's three of what the traditional intelligence tests measure, the kind of intelligence that allows you to analyze problems, evaluate arguments, and solve academic tasks. Sternberg identified three types of components within this subtheory. Meta-components are the executive processes, the planning and monitoring functions. They are the highest order of components because they tell the other components what to do. Meta components include deciding what the problem is, selecting a strategy for solving it, allocating mental resources, monitoring progress as the solution is attempted, and evaluating the outcome. Performance components are the processes that actually carry out the task, the workers. Where meta components plan the work, performance components do the work. They include processes like encoding, inference, mapping, comparison, and response. When you actually solve a mathematics problem, working through it step by step, that's performance components at work. Knowledge acquisition components are the processes used to learn new things, to encode new information, to combine it with existing knowledge, and to compare it with what is already known. This is how you build a knowledge that will eventually be used by performance components. Reading a new concept in textbook and understanding it well enough to use it later, that is knowledge acquisition at work. Creative intelligence addresses how people deal with novelty and how they automate familiar processes over time. Sternberg argued that truly intelligent people are distinguished not just by how well they perform on a familiar, well-practiced task, but by how well they respond to new situations, and how efficiently they move on from struggling with a new type of problem to handling it automatically. This theory has two components. Novelty, the ability to deal effectively with new, unfamiliar situations. When you encounter something you've never seen before, intelligence shows itself in how quickly and creatively you can make sense of it and respond. This is directly related to Cattell's fluid intelligence, the capacity to reason in novel situations. Automation, the ability to process familiar information automatically without conscious effort. When you first learn to drive, every action requires conscious attention, changing gears, checking mirrors, and steering. But after years of driving, all this becomes automatic, freeing up your conscious attention for other things. Automation is essential for intelligence because it frees up mental resources for dealing with novelty. If everything required conscious effort, you would have no problem processing capacity left for new problems. So, together, novelty and automation define intelligent performance across time. You encounter something new, novelty kicks in. As you practice and master it, automation develops. Intelligent people automate quickly, freeing themselves up for the next challenge. Contextual intelligence is perhaps Sternberg's most distinctive contribution, and the one that departs most clearly from traditional intelligence research. Where analytical intelligence is about solving academic problems with clearly defined answers, contextual intelligence is about navigating real world environments with all their ambiguity, complexity, and the lack of right answers. Sternberg sometimes called this street smarts as opposed to book smarts, though he was careful to point out that practical intelligence is not less sophisticated than analytical intelligence, just different in character. The contextual subtheory has three components. Adaptation, modifying yourself to fit better into your existing environment. For example, if you move to a new city, start a new job, or join a new social group, adaptation is what allows you to adjust your behavior, expectations, and routines to fit the new context. Most people do this most of the time. It is the default intelligent response to environmental demands. Selection, choosing a different environment when the current one is unsuitable and cannot be improved. Sometimes adaptation is not enough. The environment is so wrong for you that the intelligent thing to do is leave, selecting a new career, a new city, a new relationship when the current one is fundamentally unsuitable. This requires the intelligence to recognize when adaptation has failed and a new environment is needed. Shaping, modifying the environment itself to better fit your needs and abilities. Rather than adapting yourself to the environment or leaving it, you change it. For example, an entrepreneur who builds a business rather than fitting into an existing one is shaping it. A teacher who transforms a classroom culture rather than accepting it as fixed is shaping. This is arguably the highest form of practical intelligence, the ability to create the environment you need rather than accepting whatever you are giving. Now we come to the limitations. The main criticism is that the theory, while rich and compelling in description, has been difficult to operationalize, that is, to turn into reliable, validated measurements. The Sternberg Triarchic Abilities Test, designed to measure all three components, has not consistently produced three cleanly distinct factors in research studies. Analytical, creative, and practical scores need to correlate positively with each other, and the test has shown weaker predictive validity than traditional IQ tests in some research contexts. Critics also argue that what Sternberg calls practical intelligence may simply be a combination of social knowledge, personality traits, and domain specific expertise, rather than a form of intelligence distinct from analytical ability. We now move on to Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. Howard Gardner is an American developmental psychologist, and his theory has shaped educational philosophy and practice around the world. Gardner's theory was a deep dissatisfaction with the idea of a single intelligence measured by a single test. He argued that this conception reflects a narrow, Western academic bias. It privileges exactly the kinds of abilities valued in formal schooling and ignores the full potential of human cognitive range. Gardner proposed instead that human beings possess 8 distinct intelligences, each independent, each with its own neural basis, and each capable of independent development. Let us go through them one by one. Verbal or linguistic intelligence, the ability to use language effectively, both in speech and writing. People with high verbal intelligence are sensitive to sounds, meanings, structures, and uses of language. Writers, poets, lawyers, journalists, and public speakers tend to have highly developed verbal intelligence. Mathematical or logical intelligence, the ability to think logically, reason with numbers, and recognize abstract patterns. This is the intelligence most closely associated with scientific and mathematical thinking. The capacity for inductive and deductive reasoning, for systematic investigation, and for numerical computation. Scientists, mathematicians, engineers, and programmers typically have highly developed logical mathematical intelligence. Spatial intelligence, the ability to think in three dimensions, to perceive, manipulate, and recreate visual and spatial information. This intelligence allows people to navigate environments, understand maps and diagrams, visualize objects from different angles, and create visual representations of ideas. Artists, architects, surgeons, pilots, and chess players typically have highly developed spatial intelligence. Bodily or kinesthetic intelligence. This is the ability to use the body with skill and precision, to learn and express through physical movement. This intelligence includes the capacity to control body movements, to use the body to solve problems or create products, and to process information through movement and sensation. Athletes, dancers, surgeons, craftsmen, and actors typically have highly developed bodily kinesthetic intelligence. Musical intelligence, the ability to perceive, create, and respond to musical forms, including pitch, rhythm, timbre, and musical structure. Gardner argued that musical intelligence is as cognitively sophisticated as any other form. It involves complex pattern recognition, memory for auditory sequences, and the ability to understand and manipulate a formal symbolic system. Composers, musicians, conductors, and music critics typically have highly developed musical intelligence. Interpersonal intelligence, the ability to understand other people, their moods, motivations, desires, intentions, and feelings, and to work effectively with them. This is the intelligence of the skilled communicator, the empathetic leader, the gifted teacher, or the effective therapist. People with high interpersonal intelligence read social situations accurately, communicate persuasively, and build productive relationships. Teachers, therapists, politicians, salespeople, and religious leaders typically have highly developed interpersonal intelligence. Intrapersonal intelligence, the ability to understand oneself, one's own emotions, motivations, strengths, weaknesses, and inner life. This is the intelligence of self awareness and self regulation. People with high intrapersonal intelligence have accurate self knowledge, understand what drives them, and are able to use that self understanding to guide their behavior effectively. Philosophers, psychologists, writers of memoirs, and spiritual practitioners often have highly developed intrapersonal intelligence. Lastly, naturalistic intelligence, the ability to recognize, categorize, and understand the natural world, to distinguish among species of plants and animals, to appreciate ecological patterns, and to respond effectively to features of the natural environment. This intelligence evolved over the vast majority of human history, when survival depended on accurate knowledge of natural environments. Today, it manifests in farmers, hunters, botanists, chefs, zoologists, and for anyone with exceptional feel for the living world. Now, a fair question to ask is why these eight specifically? Gardner used a set of criteria to determine whether a human capacity qualifies as a distinct intelligence rather than a skill or a talent. The most important criteria include a distinct neural basis, evidence from brain damage studies showing that this capacity can be selectively impaired or preserved, the existence of exceptional individuals, people who show outstanding ability in this domain or who show isolated preservation of it through a distinct developmental trajectory. Let us now look at the main limitations of Gardner's theory. The most significant criticism is that there is limited empirical evidence from standard psychometric research that the eight intelligences are truly independent of each other. When tests are administered and results are statistically analyzed, the scores tend to correlate positively. That means a person who scores high on verbal intelligence also tends to score highly on logical and mathematical intelligence. This again is consistent with the single factor theory that Spearman proposed. If intelligences were truly independent, these should not exist. Critics also argue that some of Gardner's intelligences, especially musical and bodily intelligences, are better described as talents or skills rather than intelligence abilities, and that Gardner's criteria for designating them as intelligences are somewhat subjective and inconsistently applied. So we have covered all 6 intelligence theories. So let us now look at 6 theories together. Spearman gave us one general factor, the maximally unified view. Cattell said that general factor has 2 forms. Thurston said there are 7 primary abilities. Guilford, on the other hand, said there are 180 abilities. While Sternberg and Gardner, rather than simply adding more factors, changed the framework. They moved from asking what are the statistical components of intelligence to asking what does intelligence actually look like in real human lives. Remember to use this table while revising for your exams. It is a very helpful way of remembering each factor, each theory, and its main claims. We now come to the most important part of this video, which covers exam tips or strategies that you can help to prepare yourselves while revising. In terms of the 3 theories that we covered, you need to remember their key concepts and at least one limitation of each. For Guilford, know the 3 dimensions and their categories: operations, contents, and products. For Sternberg, remember all 3 components with their ISC names and subtheories. For Gardner, know the names of all 8 intelligences and one sentence explanation for each. One memory trick you can use to remember Gardner's 8 intelligences is very many students become more intelligent in nature. So that is VMSBMIIN for verbal, mathematical, spatially, bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistic. Now, if you get confused or forget the limitations for any of these theories, here is a trick you can use. The criticism shared by all these 3 theories is the positive correlation problem. This refers to the fact that when cognitive tests are administered to a large population, the intelligence scores or abilities tend to correlate positively. This is only consistent with Spearman's G that we studied in the last video, so it is difficult for the theories that propose truly independent intelligence abilities to explain this phenomenon. Guilford's independence assumption, Gardner's independence claim, and Sternberg's 3-way dimension all face the same empirical challenge. Last, and very importantly, remember to study for application-based competency questions, where you will need to apply theoretical concepts. We will now look at some sample questions. If you are preparing for the ISC exams, you have probably noticed something new. Questions are no longer just direct theory. Now the board is testing how well you can apply concepts to real-life situations. So they give competency-based questions as well. Let us look at some sample questions that have been released by the board to help you prepare, and I will tell you how to go about answering these. Let us look at the first one. Aradhana was given a task to state 10 words starting with the letter S. Which one of Guilford's dimensions is this task testing? Deductive reasoning, visual information, spatial factor, or verbal skills? Pause the video and think. What exactly is this task asking her to do? Now we have studied that Guilford proposed intelligence is made up of different dimensions, like operations, contents, and products. This question focuses on content type, specifically what kind of information is being used. So the task here is to say words starting with S. This involves language, vocabulary, and word generation, and that clearly falls under the verbal content, not visual or spatial. So over here, the verbal skills is the correct answer. Let us look at the next one. Rahim, aged 15, was part of the school mock parliament session involving real-world scenarios of planning, budget, and execution. He was selected as the team leader since he was able to think of everyday hands-on solutions on the spot with available resources. According to the Triarchic theory of intelligence, which one of the following types of intelligence does Rahim possess? Componential, experiential, contextual, or analytical? Again, pause and think. What is the key phrase here? Real-world scenarios and hands-on solutions. Sternberg's triarchic theory says intelligence has 3 types: componential or analytical, which is basically problem-solving or exam-related solving; experiential or creative, which is dealing with new scenarios, and lastly, contextual or practical, which is adapting to the environment. In this question, Rahim is being asked to handle real-world situations, is giving on-the-spot solutions, and using creativity with available resources. So this matches experiential intelligence, which is applying knowledge in new situations. So that is the correct answer, option B. So whenever you see new situations, creative solutions, or thinking on the spot, think experiential intelligence. Let us look at another example. Which one of the following statements brings out the similarities between Thurston and Cattell's theories of intelligence? Both are factor theories of intelligence. Intelligence is described as being a single entity. They group aspects of intelligence based on abilities. Both are modern theories of intelligence. And you have a combination of options. Again, pause and think. This is not memory, this is comparison. Let us go through this step by step. B. Both are factor theories, which is true. Both break down intelligence into multiple factors or abilities. Q, which says single entity, is false. That is only Spearman, not these two. R, group intelligence into abilities, again true, because Thurston says there are 7 abilities and Guilford says there are 180 abilities. Lastly, S, which talks about modern theories, is not the key similarity because it is too vague, it is not conceptual. So the correct answer over here is P and R, which is option D. Whenever you see such questions for comparing theories, remember to focus on the core idea. Ignore vague statements like modern. And hopefully these are clear and now you get an idea of how to practice these kind of competency-based questions. Let me know if you want to know more examples and I will try to make a full series of them. So that's all for today. We have completed all 6 intelligence theories the Class 12 syllabus requires. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exam-oriented tips and tricks. In the next video, we move on from theory to measurement, how intelligence is basically tested. So we will cover the concept of IQ, the definitions of mental age and chronological age, and then finally the 2 major tests, the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Test and Raven's Progressive Matrices. See you there.